in this video, I'll focus on definition for extinctions and also the definition for something being endangered. So what's extinct versus endangered. I'll also focus on some of the reasons for species becoming extinct or endangered. Right? So they often go hand in hand. I'll also talk about why we need to preserve species. So the preservation, why that's important, both for humans and their natural environment. So that's what we're trying to get out of the video. Now first, what is endangered versus extinct? Well, endangered just means that you're at serious risk of extinction, more or less. So you're not quite there yet, but you're getting there. And extinction means, well, there's no living members alive at all, right? So that means you're completely wiped out, you're no longer there, basically. We can't find you, you're extinct. Now things that are endangered would be things like the gorilla, why? Because they've lost lots of habitat due to human kind of destruction of forests. Things like the whale because of hunting, and things like the elephant also because of hunting. These are three examples of species that have low populations, so low that eventually they could become extinct. Now we say that usually about 17,000, that's our rough estimate, but that estimate is actually wrong. It's probably much higher than that. But 17,000 species are currently considered to be endangered, which means that they are at serious risk of extinction. Now, in terms of extinction, well, we have quite recent extinctions. So these are in the last 100 years or so. Things like the dodo and the Tasmanian wolf have been around until quite recently, but then were wiped out not long ago. Then we have the more ancient ones, so things that are hundreds of thousands, in some cases millions and millions of years old. So I'm writing millions. So things like obviously dinosaurs. You can see dinosaurs here. You can see other ancient living things. So they were wiped out a long time ago, millions of years ago in most cases. And then we even have things which were wiped out in some cases billions of years ago. Right? So before life evolved into these complex animals and plants, everything used to be bacteria. And a lot of bacteria are still alive now, but many of their former species or ancestors were wiped out in some of the cases billions of years ago. But the important part is you need to know that extinction is actually quite natural. It's quite common, right? So 99% of all organisms that have ever lived are now extinct, which means, again, less than 1% of what was once on Earth lives now. The rest is gone forever in most cases. But the idea is, why do things become endangered? And what rate is it normal? And what rate is it kind of a problem? So we're heading towards something that's a bit of a problem. But some reasons in terms of why you might have things become endangered is competition. Right? So in some cases you might have a new predator or a new competition within that ecosystem, and they're kind of out-competing the rest. They're better adapted, which means they just take over, and then other things become endangered. You might have climate change. So climate changes, and that means the environment changes dramatically, and all of a sudden you can't compete anymore and you become endangered and extinct. Right? That's quite common as well. Or a natural disaster. Right? So some kind of natural disaster. I mean, we have the asteroid that hit 60 million years ago, but that's not an example of natural disaster that can cause things to become endangered and then eventually extinct. But these all here, I would say, are natural. They're natural factors. Now what I'll discuss is more the human impacts. So for example, we have things like pollution, right? So pollution, chemicals, or other things we pollute water or land with can kill lots of species. So frogs and turtles are quite impacted. We have things like hunting, right? Illegal but also illegal hunting of whales, elephants, you name it, can cause things to become endangered and eventually extinct. Loss of habitat, right? Often due to deforestation or any other human impacts. Loss of habitat is a huge one as well. And then also introduced species. So we have in Australia, we have the cane toad, and we have the fox and the rabbit. All of these were introduced from Europe, and what they're doing is they're causing huge problems for the local population because they can't compete against these introduced species, and it's causing the local population to become wiped out. Right? So these are some examples of the human factor of what's causing huge problems. Now, why do we have to care? Well, we should care because loss of biodiversity has quite a few impacts. So first of all, there's the moral argument to say, nature is quite beautiful. Do we really want to destroy it and have things be lost forever? So that's important to kind of consider. Another thing is food source. So obviously all these things we're wiping out. In many cases they're used especially by the poor, more developing countries for their food, which means if they're gone, well, that's going to impact humans in terms of the ones that need it the most, because they can't afford food anymore. So that's a problem. And one big thing is actually medicine. So most of our medicines have come from plant or animal-based research, and often it's very obscure plants we find that can be helpful for medicine. And we've only actually examined very few percent, only 5 to 10% of all plants and animals out there for a medical purpose. So if they all get wiped out, that means we can make much less medicine. So that's a huge reason why we need to make sure we do care, because it's all our own benefit. Now again, we also need to care because at the end we're at fault, right? That human impact I mentioned earlier, those 4 factors are causing huge problems. We're actually going towards the 6th extinction, the 6th biggest extinction in world history, and it's quite possible that by the end of this it might be the biggest, right? So I'll talk about that more in a different video, but it is something we have to worry about because we're having huge impact, so we should try to reverse it, right? And these are just some examples. So in a few years we'll have 1 in 4 amphibians, so that's frogs, that will be wiped out. We'll have 1 in 4 birds, 1 in 4 mammals, 6 out of 7 turtles that get wiped out, and 1 in 3 fish populations. Right, that's happening in the next about 20 or so years. And these are some of the causes we mentioned earlier, right? So habitat loss, climate change. This is also due to us as well. This is pollution. This is using too much, and this is introduced species. So all of these are human impacts, and we are really the cause of it. Right, so the idea was to name, oops, this is the wrong one, sorry. That was low intentions. The idea was we need to be able to define extinction versus endangered, right? Extinction means they're no longer there. Endanger means their population is so low that they might become extinct. We should be able to name a couple of reasons for species becoming extinct or endangered. Should be at least 4 human, and about 3 which are natural that you need to be able to name. And talking about some of the reasons why we need to preserve animals and plants. So for example, for food, or for medicine, or just because we are to blame. And that's not fair that we let something die if we can change it. Right, so these are some examples of what you need to know and get from this video.